Oh, hello. Greetings, Reclaimers. I am 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Podcast Evolved. Protocol dictates that you must listen. Come, we have a wealth of knowledge to share with you, and you don't want to make my blue eye red. Do you, Reclaimers?
Welcome, Spartans, to another Halo Book Club episode. That's right, 2 in the 1 month. You are being spoiled rotten. As part of Podcast Evolved, your home for Halo. I am your host today, David, and with me is Oren.
Hey, everyone.
And Krista.
Henry is my new boyfriend.
Ooh, watch out, Trent.
You can't live up to a naked elite with a cricket bat.
A really effective cricket bat. It's ridiculous. Henry's so cool. So this month's book club, if you did not know, is the Mona Lisa from Halo Evolutions Volume 2, or the big collection if you have that. The Mona Lisa is the perfect choice for October because it is Halo's probably spookiest story. It is your standard sci-fi alien loose on a ship with no power. You send Marines in, there are horror things happening, you have Covenant, you have Flood, you have wonderful, awful, disgusting things happening, being told so very, very well. I'm going to get some of the social stuff out of the way and then we'll get talking on the book club. If you haven't, please go check out our website. It's halopodcastevolved.com or halopodcast.com. On the website, you will find everything you need to know about us. We have our standard Podcast Evolved show, a weekly show alternates between lore and the latest Halo/Xbox news. We've Mission Debrief, which is a deep dive into every Halo game's campaign mission, done mission by mission. Our newest show is Builds with Blocks, and that's all centered around the micro action figures and brick-based construction sets within the Halo universe. So hi to those guys over there, pumping out some good work. We have a Patreon page, should you like us that much. So check us out at patreon.com/HaloPodcastEvolve. You get all sorts of variety of exclusive rewards for our patrons, early episodes, swag, all that kind of stuff. There's the Discords over there. Go check us out. If you'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. So thank you guys so much for your continued support. You guys are crazy.
They love us so much because we love them.
They really, really do. So I hope they enjoyed this episode.
Enjoy the spooky episode. Ooh.
Also, I encourage our listeners who want to learn more. You can support us on Audible. Listen to a growing collection of Halo novels all in one place, along with thousands of other novels, podcasts, guided wellness programs, and more. Audible originals, etc. Use the URL audibletrial.com/podcastevolve. That will give you a free trial and give us a little bumpity bump. So that'd be great if you are interested. Oren is our resident audiobook listener. Well, him and Aaron really, but Oren's like an exclusive. He loves those audios.
I mean, I just spend so much time in the car, it just makes sense. And I'll get into that.
So, like I said, I'll give you some of the stats to break it down. So, our book club is the Mona Lisa, which is a weird title, you would think, for a Halo novel. Is the name of the ship. That's just the only kind of bit of spoilery I'll kind of tell you there, and that's kind of just all it is. The author is a joint author of Tessa Kumm and Jeff Vandermeer. This is, I think, their one and only. I don't think we've had any. Jeff Vandermeer sounds vaguely familiar, but I think this is their only book that they've done. The publisher is Tor. Their formats are everything. You can get the audios, you can get hard books, audiobooks, the digital books, they're everywhere.
So many books. Movie books.
And also a motion comic that's unique to this kind of title. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's like a movie book. That's right, Krista. It's like halfway between a real book and a fake book and a thingy book.
It's very confusing. I don't know what to think of it.
There are various release dates. So obviously Halo Evolutions has had multiple iterations. So the original, which is a single volume book, came out in November 24th, 2009. Then a year later, we had Volume 1 released, and then Volume 2, they both came out in November 2nd and November 30th, respectively. So Volume 2 is where this book is contained. And April 16th, 2019, so obviously many years later, we have a new edition that is a single volume where all the books are there. If you had the separate volumes, you just get extra couple of, I think there's an extra story in each one, and some kind of like, some kind of bonus stuff there for you. The Mona Lisa is a large short story. It is about 150-ish pages long. It takes up the bulk of Volume 2.
Which is kind of hilarious. You turn to any page in Volume 2 and it's probably Mona Lisa.
You can just like pull out random things like, yeah, you're getting a lot of Mona Lisa. And it has a unique piece of art in the in Volume 2.
I ripped it out and put it on my wall.
I'm surprised. It is Henry holding Benty with his cricket bat and a oar. And it's just so cool. Oh, he's also naked.
There's one shot in the motion comic, and it shows Henry has a dump truck ass.
Oh, does he?
Oh, man.
It's a big one. Holy shit. I was like, wow. That's a big caboose you got there.
Oh, Henry.
We all love Henry.
The Mona Lisa. It is probably one of my favorite short stories. Definitely one of my favorites in Evolutions. We did a book club for this many years ago, but we're rejigging it again because we got new peoples. And it's October, and we haven't read it in many years. So it's Oren's first time, which is going to be fascinating. It is my, I'd say, second or third, and Krista's
fourth, probably.
I also watched some of the motion comic. Krista watched it all. Oren kind of watched it all as well. So we'll be talking about that. And Oren did do the audiobook format, so he has some unique input there too. I will say very quickly, the story is, the Mona Lisa is a prison ship. It is, for some reason, outside of the Halo debris from the original Halo CE. This book is based in October 2552, so it's literally right after the events of CE. This prison ship has pretty much got Covenant human prisoners that are being experimented on by Oni with the Flood. So this is their first time kind of like coming across the Flood, and they started to experiment with it on this prison ship. It's pretty dark, it's pretty horrible. There is a prowler that is sent to the debris field looking for some quote-unquote something. It's the Mona Lisa they were looking for. There's an AI. There is a group of Marines are pretty much sent from the prowler, which is called the UNSC Red Horse. And they're sent, a small group of Marines are sent on a Pelican that doesn't crash.
It does not crash.
It gets stolen, though.
It just gets stolen, but because it got stolen, it means it survived, Krista.
It's true.
So it made it to the end of the story.
There's a lot of shady Oni shit in this, too.
There is some dirt. This is some really dirty Oni shit.
It's disgusting.
So we have some really interesting characters in this story. Lopez takes a group of Marines. I'll let Oren talk to his bits of it. But essentially these Marines go on to the Mona Lisa to investigate. They're not given any information. They're just told to go there and figure out what's going on. Obviously the ship is infested with flood and all sorts of bad things happen. It's a really dark story. It's horrible. It's wonderful.
It's also just a great perspective because half of this novella is just the Marines trying to figure out what the hell is going on.
And what happens when you don't give people the information they need. And that they're sent there deliberately. And it's pretty horrible.
They're sent there pretty much to die.
And you even have like their commanding officer who's also in the dark, but then as he learns what's going on, he slowly has to accept certain things, and it kind of just changes his perspective and how he views this op, and he ultimately has to just accept where it has gone and what that means for kind of like how it ends and all that.
He just feels shittier and shittier throughout the story.
Yeah, even to see his transformation as like a side character is interesting. Like this really has that perspective of going from bad to worse to terrible.
So, Oren, since your first time reading this book, what did you think, buddy?
I want impressions. I want your full reaction.
Pretty much what you said was almost what I knew going into it. I basically knew that it was a flood horror story with a bunch of Marines, but I had no idea that it was essentially Halo's version of Aliens, where you have the smart ass Marines talking smack to each other and throwing different words at each other and kind of making the best of the situation, but accepting like that's what they needed to do. And I love that kind of stuff. And so I'm like driving home at the end of my work week, and I throw on the audiobook, and this audiobook narrator, I think it's Holter Graham, because he's listed as one of the audiobook voices along with Jen Taylor, Steve Downs, and Frankie O'Connor, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't one of them three, so I'm assuming it's Holter, but if it's not, then that's my bad. But if you're familiar with audiobooks, often the narrator will try to give different voices and kind of put a little bit of personality into words, but they don't take too much self-direction, because they kind of want the listener or the reader to kind of make those choices on how to read the situation, but they give you different voices to kind of distinguish between the characters. And this short story, for being a short story, has a ton of characters, and so he kind of does the opposite, where he doesn't change voices too much, but he really makes some strong choices as to the delivery and inflection, and it completely sells it, in my opinion, and it got me hooked. I was like laughing on how amazing it was, and what really did it for me, the first moment in the story that made me feel like utter trash of like the horridness of this story, was when they're looking for the rabbit character.
Oh yeah.
And they go through a corridor, and Lopez, the sergeant, sees their comrade being literally stomped into pulp by an elite. The way it is described, like if you just read it, you're just like, wow, that sounds terrible. But the way the audiobook narrator describes it just makes it so much more visceral and disgusting, and you can just hear the bones and the organs and the blood, and just.
But the motion comic did it great.
And then the motion comic did it even to a good extent as well. So like I think that was like the moment to where like I was already pulled in, but that's like where I straight up was like, all right, this is gonna just get worse, and it's gonna be great and amazing, and it really does. Just like from what we know of the flood and just how like grotesque they are, the way that this book is just described, just from like a written point of view, I think was just very, very well done. And it really paints a really, imaginative and visceral image of what's going on. And then on top of all that, this audiobook narrator just really helps bring it home. So I was on board from the get-go. It was longer than I expected. Like I knew it was one of the longer stories, but I think it clocked like 2 hours and 50 minutes for the audiobook, and that's almost a fourth of a usual novel. And at 150 pages, that's, a little bit more than a fourth of like a standard 400, 500 page novel. So yeah, that's kind of my initial impressions. Like just really enjoyed it. I liked the kind of roller coaster that it goes through, the different viewpoints, because like that's kind of common in Halo novels, but to kind of have these bite-sized point of views from these different characters was also very intriguing, to kind of see different perspectives as they experience the infection forms and all that at different times and different moments and all that kind of stuff. So I very much enjoyed it, and it was such a delight to be exposed to this just horrendous, gruesome story.
What did you think of it reading it again, Krista?
I always love reading the Mona Lisa. The suspense wears down over time. Definitely. I think the first time I read this book, I was literally terrified, and now I read it and I'm like, yeah, Henry. Flood.
Pretty much when you meet Henry, it stops being kind of horror-ish. Jump scares are kind of gone. It's more then for like the volume of what it shows you of like the flood being the flood and Henry being awesome.
I mean, watching that one person getting dragged into the
Burgundy,
yeah, being dragged into the flood. I guess the proto-grave mind, probably, or a key mind. They're making something.
It sounded they were making something, yeah, with this with the engines, and they were like feeding them pilots and crew, and obviously trying to accrue information about where they were, how to use the ship.
Yeah, I think their goal was to try to figure out who they needed to consume to learn how to activate the slip space engine, so then they can get out of there and go do their flood things.
Because I also thought it was, yeah, we can talk about it later, but let's just say, like, they steal the pilot, but I really thought they would have locked down or done something with the Pelican, and they didn't. I thought that was kind of strange.
I thought they would just take the Pelican.
Me too.
I guess they wanted the big ship because that's where the bulk of their mass is.
Yeah, all of their infection forms and combat forms wouldn't be able to fit on the Pelican. So since they're already on the Mona Lisa, they might as well just stay there. And then the whole ship kind of basically becomes High Charity, just on a smaller scale.
I also don't think the Flood have any communication arrays or anything like that left on the ship, so they're probably pretty much blind. So probably their best option was to just take the ship and take it to a human-filled planet. Because they know where all the populated planets are. They've definitely taken the nav people, and they have that knowledge. So it was probably better off doing that than staying around the Halo and trying to catch all these other ships that are here, because they're pretty much blind to everything else.
I'm glad that the audio book seems like so unique and so kind of different, because like you said, Oren, there, for a short story, there's a ridiculous amount of characters in it. The motion comic cuts some of them out. In a nutshell, you have the lead, we'll say, is Sergeant Lopez. So she's like the lead Marine that's sent over, and she's an absolute badass. I think she's a great character.
Oh, she's awesome.
I didn't like some of the line delivery in the motion comic as well, because I wasn't mad on the voice acting in the motion comic.
The motion comic is a lot darker, I feel. It kind of cuts out a lot of the funny banter that goes on during all of this. Maybe that's why. They also, for whatever reason, they changed ice cream to shore leave, and that really bugged me. I don't know why.
See, I disagree.
I thought it was the weird in-joke.
They always have a funny little joke. I mean, for context, they essentially called ice cream as once they're done, they get to go home and they get to have ice cream and relax and not be on service. And it's essentially what they're saying is they're
because they refer Lopez as Mama Lopez, so she's all looking after all her kids and getting them treats.
She thinks of them as rosary beads because her grandma would count rosary beads.
I really liked that motif throughout the story. As different characters would die, she would like remove them and like add them and count them, and it like I just really felt that like when she needed a moment to just kind of like think things over, she would hold these rosary beads, and it's like her evaluating and assessing the situation, but also like constantly thinking about her squad, and like oh dude, that's so good.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I think she's a very strong character throughout the novel. I love the kind of Sergeant Johnson-esque ending of both these characters, or just essentially like it ends with like her and Henry in a face-off with no ammunition. So you imagine Lopez is not going to beat Henry in hand-to-hand.
Good. I love Henry.
Probably doesn't matter because a Shiva is just being sent to like destroy the Mona Lisa at the same time.
I doubt that the Red Horse is going to be picking up any of these escape pods anyway. It's too much of a risk to everyone else on the ship.
Yeah, and definitely when you have... Okay, like we'll talk about another character here. There's a character called Clarence.
Ah, he's an asshole.
Yeah, he's a quiet guy.
He's a stoic badass.
Yeah, a stoic badass. Really accurate, really good.
Almost too good. Like, throughout the book, he's almost too put together and too good at his job.
Yeah, Benty kind of like is one of the kind of second in command. She's like a medic. Near the start of the book, Lopez splits her squad because, okay, they get onto the ship, they figure out, okay, there's an infection here, we don't know what to do. They gun down a bunch of naked elites to attack them when they kind of first land, and they're just like, this is weird, the Covies are here, but there's no gear, no armor, they're just naked elites. They're just, okay, this is strange. So as they go on through, and like we said, that horrible scene where Rabbit is being like destroyed by an elite is just stomping on him, stomping this human into mush, and he's doing it because he's infected. But the Marines don't realize it yet. Lopez kind of like figures out a little bit of like when looking through. That was a great scene, even in the book, of like her looking for dog tags in this smushed mess of a human being and finding a big tendril kind of spider leg thing growing out of inside of Rabbit. That was horrible.
Real quick though, about the motion comic, we were talking about this before the show. The way the animation of the graphic motion was really used very creatively throughout the motion comic, and this scene I think particularly did one very, very interesting sort of warping effect to where you had the elite with bullet holes, and it would kind of get distorted and warped in a like inconsistent fashion with the gunfire and the flashes of like muzzle flash, and that effect made it seem that the elite was getting just kind of like completely bombarded by all these bullets that the Marines were shooting at it. And I think it really sold that. The effect was there. It was very effective. I just like really liked like that moment. And there's a few more other ones. Like Krista, you said there was one where like a door enlarges or something.
It's when they're in the bridge and the Flood are knocking at the door trying to get into the bridge. And the effect that they used for like the door being like knocked around and almost being torn down is they just used the blow up tool in Photoshop is what it looks like to kind of like bubble out the door and just kind of pulse it. It feels so creative. It feels like they probably had a very limited budget on this. And so for effects like that, they just used very almost practical Photoshop effects. It's really well done.
And then even the inverse of that, I think there's a scene where Lopez was like giving like a little bit of a speech to her Marines, like we got to stick it to the Flood or whatever. And like when they do that kind of turn to like squint down instead of like having a new type of image, they had the motion of her squinting and kind of narrowing her face, and they kind of, instead of enlarging like on the door, they kind of reduced it and kind of squeezed her face together a little bit and was able to really get that emotion on her face.
You have like the squad essentially has to split when they get contact with Red Horse and say, yeah, there's crazy shit going on here, there's Covenant here, we don't really know what's going on. So the commander and Rebecca, the AI, who's an Oni AI, pretty much says, yeah, we're enacting the Cole Protocol, you have to purge the nav computers and get off this ship. Essentially, that's what they're being told to do. The commander very much isn't listening to them because he's got different information and he's not being told everything. It's kind of weird. It's all very shadowy.
I got the impression that Lopez is like, Commander, we don't know like what's going on, but like this is kind of what it is. And he says, well, if there's Covenant there, then you need to activate the Cole Protocol. And then after they talk, Rebecca's like, that's not really what we're supposed to do. Like we kind of need to blow up the ship. And he's like, well, there's something that you're not telling me, and from what they are telling me, like I have no reason to believe X, Y, and Z. Like the situation is not what you're making it seem to be. And then he like accuses her of maybe being rampant because she's been in service for 6 years. I think it's my favorite scene with the commander because you don't know how much he knows, but I really got it, especially from the motion comment, that he's pretty good straight edge. Like he understands what is at stake.
There's a lot of the motion comic, and maybe the audiobook doesn't have it. It leaves out a lot of that stuff. I mean, like, there's way more going on between, like, the commander and the AI in terms of, like, his backstory and...
I don't think they even mentioned Chauncey.
No, they probably didn't. Yeah, so that was the previous AI of this ship was taken from them, and they were given this AI right before this mission and sent into the debris field essentially to look for stuff.
She's literally just there because she knows all about what's going on that ship and it needs to be destroyed. And Chauncey can't find out about it because he's probably not that high up in the hierarchy. Do we want to just talk about what actually is going on behind the scenes with this prison ship?
The prison ship, essentially, there is a Oni agent came onto the ship from Section 3. He's just John Smith, obviously a fake name, and he's a kind of science officer. So he goes on this ship, he takes it over, and brings in some Covenant prisoners, elite. And now you got human prisoners, you have Covenant prisoners, and what they also have is an infected Covenant prisoner with the Flood. He essentially begins experimenting, seeing like what happens, how it takes over. He lets it infect other Covenant, and they don't really say what happened, but something happened in his lab. Obviously, it got free. He didn't realize how strong they could be, like how physically strong like an infected elite would be. And they pretty much get free and take over the ship, as you can expect, and it becomes a horror ship. And he hardcore nopes out and jumps into a panic room and just locks himself in. He was experimenting by letting it infect human and letting it infect the Covenant, and trying to see what it was, trying to watch how it, like he got a lot of information. He sounded quite intelligent when he was, eventually Lopez finds him in his panic room, brings him out, doesn't trust who it is, very suspicious of this guy. They eventually come across like a corpse that looks like a merging of a human and an elite, and they couldn't figure out what it was, and eventually she just beats this guy.
Until he talks, yeah.
searches him down, finds his only ID badge hidden in his shoe. He eventually fesses up that, like, yeah, he was experimenting, he did this. This is pretty much what it is. He found a whole bunch of information, how the flood works, how it infects, how it takes over.
Oni seemed to even be trying to use the flood as a weapon.
Yeah, that was kind of hinted at as well, is to see if they can control the flood and use the flood since they are so effective.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Most of these prisoners aren't actually, like, on death row, or... Because we meet one of the prisoners. He's kind of a weirdo. His name's Rimmer.
He's been in the cell for a little too long.
He was just in prison because he was selling stolen goods. This isn't a maximum security prison.
It's just an unlucky choice, I guess. Oni found this ship, took it, and said, yeah, this is ours now, and this is what we're doing.
We're gonna jump to the Halo. It's one of the biggest red flags, is like... Because the first question everyone asks is, why is this prison ship here?
The civilian ship here, and one of the most classified sites.
Yeah, one of the lines that I laughed at, it was like, how did it get here? Like, how does it know where to be here when we don't even know where we're here? Like...
I thought that was actually pretty good. The newbie had a great line. I didn't think it was cool. There's just some of the other characters are kind of great as well. Like, when the team splits into two, it's that classic moment of, don't split your team. Do you know what I mean? This is the terrible idea. Why would you do this? This is obviously a horror show, and you're splitting up, so this is a terrible idea. So Lopez is like, okay, we're going call protocol, we're going to go for the bridge, the second team is going to go for the engine room.
Which the engine room is fucked.
It's a slow whittling down of each team's losing people to the flood, and I just think some of them get some pretty horrible deaths, but it's pretty cool. So like the Marine team, let's say, just quickly becomes like a handful of people left. The pilot, it does the classic...
The pilot stays in the Pelican, and then you essentially have Lopez's team and Benty's team, and the the pilot gets like snatched.
Yes.
That's what I was saying. The classic scene with the pilot is that the pilot's on the Pelican is sealed up. There are two Marines, Cranker and... I can't remember what's the other guy's name? Cranker and Mahler. These two Marines were left behind with the Pelican just to kind of watch it. They get murdered viciously by flood. The pilot is watching but doesn't really know what she's seeing. So just watching out these cameras and looking at different things in the dark, and she just sees like the rifle just left on the ground, and like in the book it describes it like, sounds fucking scary as hell in the book, with just like she's hearing noises, doesn't really know what's going on, the lights are fading, she doesn't really know what to do, she doesn't want to turn off the lights on the ship to kind of signify it to someone in the ship, she's just trying to hide, she's freaking the fuck out. It's really, really cool. And then she sees like shapes moving in the shadows, and then she thinks she sees like a human with two heads, but like, no, that can't be real. Kind of dismisses it, that she's just freaking herself out. She's sitting there chewing gum, not really knowing what to do. And then the classic horror thing of, clearly you're an idiot and you shouldn't open the Pelican. But she sees on the camera the two Marines kind of slowly walking up, and they look like they've got blood on them, they look injured, and she's like, oh my god, I better open up.
And you know what's about to happen.
And it's just like, no, they're clearly flood-infected monstrosities. They beat the shit out of her and then kidnap her, essentially, and like bring her away. So that was kind of weird in the book reading, because like generally flood don't do that, but then it's actually very clever, because like we said, they're building kind of a proto-grave mine thing in the engine room. So like they bring the pilot there, and then later on in the book she dies incredibly horribly, and the motion comic shows you just her being like absorbed inside this mass.
They just toss her in. There's not like a tentacle that comes out and grabs her. She's just thrown onto this pile of flesh and just sinks into it.
Just gets like literally consumed.
Oh, it's awful. And like Benty is actually in that room, and they see her getting taken, but this is the most infested part of the ship, and she can't do anything. So she watches her friend get thrown on there and just hears the screams. It's just like, oh, fuck.
Pretty horrible.
Do we want to talk about, like, the ending?
I think the one thing before we talk about the ending is that during this, we didn't really say it, but Henry is an elite that is, like, partnered up with Rimmer, who Benty and Clarence and some of the other characters meet on their sort of, on their mission to the engine room. That's an interesting moment, because like weapons are drawn, all this kind of stuff, and Rimmer is like, wait, no, don't shoot, like he's okay, like I know he's an elite and like he kills everybody and like we hate him, but like he's Henry, and they're like, Henry, why is his name Henry? And he's like, well, I don't know his real name, so I just gave him Henry.
It's funny where like the dialogue in the book is great of where, because it's told from Benty's point of view perspective, and she's more stunned that the elite is named Henry out of everything else. That like it's just she's just speechless of like what the like her brain just cannot compute an elite named Henry holding a cricket bat.
And also remember, Henry has no way to talk to him.
They say that. I think Benty says that like he tries to say something and all she can stare at is like the mandibles and the gross teeth and like his throat because it's not hidden behind any of the armor.
It's awesome.
So that's where we meet Henry, and then throughout Benty's squad's sort of mission, Henry has some pretty cool moments, and he like even like pushes Benty out of the way to like kill a flood form and like protects her, and
he saves them all numerous times, just like beating the shit out of infection forms with his cricket bat. Eventually, Benty gives him a gun because Rimmer is terrible at shooting. So like at the very end when they're running away from the engine room, because Benty like throws all her grenades into the engine room, into that mass that Burgundy got taken into, and they just like, fuck this, leg it. Clarence tries to stop her, but like she doesn't make it in time, so then they have to run. So you have pretty much all that's left of Benty's squad is Benty, Rimmer, Henry, and Clarence, and they're just running, and then fucking bailing out, and they're just like, fuck this, give Henry an assault rifle. So Henry's running with an assault rifle in one hand and a cricket bat in the other, just like fighting off flood forms with these people. It's cool. The objective at the end pretty much comes from you have the two squads separated in two sides of the ship. Lopez and essentially McCaw, they're the only two that are left of her squad, make it to the bridge and they make it to the comms. And she has stolen John Smith. He eventually got away from them. He like betrayed them and snuck out into a different room. He has like only secret access to the ship, so he just nopes out and bails out on them in the lab. And then eventually like she steals his badge and gets in and reads all the files, so she has like loads of information about flood and stuff. So they contact Red Horse. She tells the commander all this. The commander is like, I already know, because he managed to break down that great scene like you said, Oren, with Rebecca the AI. He kind of threatened her with like, you're very close to rampancy, don't fuck with me. And she pretty much cracks and tells him all about the flood and shows him footage of John fighting the flood and the flood murking the shit out of the Marines on installation 07?
04?
04?
The commander also got information from Smith when he returned to the Red Horse.
That happened later. He hasn't returned yet, and he didn't even meet him.
He's just on his way.
He checked in with Rebecca, but I thought he got there on the when they were talking on the bridge when he's like,
no, he's on his way. He had hailed the Red Horse and talked to him.
Oh, that's what I mean then.
Lopez like, oh for fuck, she's so angry that like John Smith got away, stole the Pelican and fucked off. And she's like, so the objective at the end pretty much comes that he's telling her, you have about 10 minutes to get there. Are 2 pods left. You have to get down to this deck where they are. Get out before I arm the Shiva. You have about 10 minutes because it's a Covenant ship coming towards them, and it hasn't detected them yet, but it's kind of on its way to them.
It's definitely going to detect them when they blow the Mona Lisa sky
Yeah, because they need to blow it up with a Shiva missile.
Lopez put the intercom on for the whole ship so that everybody could hear, because she wasn't able to talk to her Marines. So that was kind of a clever thing. And then the flood go crazy because they hear this intercom message. And essentially you have these two teams, the remnants, running towards the last pods left on the ship. And it kind of ends really abruptly when the two squads eventually meet up. Benty gets hurt. Henry's carrying her, hence that piece of art with Henry, assault rifle, Benty, and cricket bat. It's awesome. And they all make it to pretty much the last pod with loads of flood flying behind them. Then like the end it gets mad really, really quick. So Clarence shoots Rimmer in the back of the head and becomes a bit of a standoff because he's trying to shoot Henry, who's holding Benty, who then Lopez pulls her gun on Clarence and is like, what the fuck is going on? And then she has her newbie with her McCraw. And it's like the 5 creatures are also, and then there's flood running towards them. They're all like, what the fuck's going on? And Clarence is pretty much revealed to be Oni the whole time. And he's like, there's not meant to be any survivors from here.
Yeah, he's like the cleanup crew.
So he's pretty much trying to clean them all up. Obviously probably bail out himself. Benty kind of jumps off Henry because she's very badly hurt. So she's like, fuck this. She jumps at him, pushes Clarence in towards the flood. Lopez starts shooting with Henry in towards the flood. She realizes the sound goes off. She turns around. McCraw has just bailed out into one of the pods and fucked off. The little newbie dick that he is. And we never hear from him again.
Because Lopez probably could have gone in, like, Like maybe two people could fit in a pod like that.
They're very small pods. They could probably, they probably could. But like, it ends up being Lopez and Henry. They're just like, fuck, Benty gets taken. Clarence gets taken by the flood. They're all fucked. So Henry and Lopez run into the last airlock. They kill all the last floods. Lopez runs out of ammo and then looks at the pod and realizes there's only room for one of us. And she kind of says it then, there's only room for one of us. Sorry, buddy, but you're a covey. So she tries to shoot him, has no ammo. Henry's like, fuck you.
Yeah, right.
The book just ends with the two of them going at each other.
It's a great ending. I kind of love it.
Yeah. There's also, like, Henry's reaction to when Rimmer gets shot in the head. Like, he freaks the fuck out.
He's so angry, yeah.
His fucking buddy.
His boy
just got fucking murked instantly. Now, he went out nicely, Rimmer. You know what I mean? So, like, because Clarence got fucking munched up.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so did Benty, too. Like, she basically tackled them into a flood charge. And between the two of them, they probably got ripped apart.
I think it's awesome.
Henry totally won, though, right? Like,
he won the fifth fight because, I mean, as badass as Lopez is,
yeah,
human with no weapons versus an elite with a cricket bat,
it's not gonna work.
Even if she, like, managed to get, like, a clean hit with the rifle, like, to his head to, like, knock him out or something, I feel like Elite's just naturally just stronger to where Henry can probably just take that hit from a Marine.
I think so.
And I don't know what more she could have done. What she should have done is pulled a Sergeant Johnson at the end of the legendary ending of CE and just dropped the gun and just said, come here, and they just hug, and then the Shiva blows up the ship.
There's a Shiva on the way, so that's a pretty instant death.
They're probably not going to get far enough away from the ship to live in the escape pod anyway.
That's what I'm thinking too. I'm just gonna watch the end of the motion comic. Yeah, it just goes black.
Yeah, they're just running at each other and then it just cuts in the motion comic.
It ends pretty quickly in the motion comic.
But the motion comic also leaves out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's still an hour long. Like, it's still, like, I mean, it's longer than most, like, TV episodes. For the information it tells, like, it still gives you a lot, and it does kind of, what it chose to leave out, I feel like, were good decisions. I don't feel like there was anything that I was like, oh, man, they didn't include that.
And also the Flood are just so well done in this. Oh my god. At one point, you see one of the Flood, it has a human face, and then it, like, opens, and then the infection forms in it. And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, the way... there's a scene where it's before they get to the engine room in Benty's squad, and someone gets infected, and it's like, while they're changing, they're also thrashing out at the rest of the squad, and he'll, like, throw a punch, and as he throws a punch, the arm just turns into a tentacle and just, like, shoots out, like yeah, the animation is so good. We definitely need more of these, like, for fractured short stories or, like, infinite stories. So well done.
So, as you can tell, we are all really super positive on the Mona Lisa.
It's pretty much universally loved in the Halo community.
Yeah. It's got some tropes in there for sure, but I think it works really well because the Flood are horrible, and being trapped on a ship in the dark with the Flood should be one of the most horrible things you can be in Halo universe. So I'm glad that there exists this story that can tell the perspective of a Marine not equipped with the information or equipment to deal with the Flood.
And just figuring it out, it's so good. Also, it's been 10 years and we have not gotten another, like, really good horror story out of Halo.
Not really, and, like, Halo's kind of moved away from that. It's, I don't know, it is kind of a mainstream franchise, and maybe, like, horror is not mainstream. Well, like,
hey, it is pretty mainstream, though. I mean, having a subset, like, small horror something within a bigger universe isn't...
That's true. There's definitely an opportunity there for, like, even a collection of short stories of just horrible things. In the Halo universe, like, you could definitely tell Flood-related crazy-ass stories, or even Brute, one of the Brute short stories. Do you remember, like, there's the Uralani with eating humans in a camp and, like, playing around with them for sport? Like, can't remember what that's called, but that's a horrible story too. So, like, there's definitely some good elements in here, and I guess, like, the motion comic's great. It sounds like the audiobook is actually great.
Well, and it's so easy. I mean, you put the Flood in pretty much any situation, and it's a horror thing. You know, everybody wants Dead Space to come back. The Mona Lisa's just Dead Space. This is just Dead Space.
Imagine a Dead Space Halo. I'd fucking love that.
Oh my gosh.
Ugh.
And they've experimented with other things in the past, like ODST and stuff like that, and RTS. I mean, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to make a nice horror game that's maybe like 4 or 5 hours long, a shorter game, but just gives you a different experience in the Halo universe, because it's really good.
It is.
The only other piece of Halo media that I think comes close to this story is another Flood story, naturally, which is from the Halo graphic novel Breaking Quarantine with it's Sergeant Johnson, and he fights Flood at the end of. It's kind of how he escaped the armory that they thought it was. I forget what the name of that bunker is or whatever, where they find the Flood on Installation 04.
343 Guilty Spark, that level.
Yeah, whatever the name of that location is, where 343 is. That's some pretty wicked art. That's just so good.
It's such a low-hanging fruit. It feels strange that no one at 343 has plucked it, you know? It's so easy. You throw Flood in any situation and it's a really cool horror thing, and people really like horror. I mean, everyone kind of likes a good scary read or a scary movie or a scary game. I mean, some of the biggest games on Twitch are horror games.
It's true.
Yeah.
You guys have anything else to say? Any kind of last thoughts?
I love this, and I love spooky season. I don't want a Master Chief costume for Halloween. I want my Flood costume.
The last thing I'll say about it is that we touched on this earlier, but just how crazy Oni has always been. But I mean, you can't blame him too much for going down this path, but it also just shows that some people in Oni, like this John Smith character, just takes it one step further and kind of goes his own mad scientist ways, and it just gets the better of him and everybody. And it's just listening to how Rebecca talks to the commander and how she just so deceptively tries to talk her way around things. I think that's one of the big takeaways from this story from a universe building point of view, is that Oni will do whatever they can to do whatever that they want.
Yeah. They want to get the job done. Well, and they want to research everything, you know? There's no off limits for Oni. It's just oh, there's a deadly parasite? Yeah, let's take a look at that, see if we can do anything. I'm not sure Oni's really done anything since this.
Not that we're aware of. I don't know. I mean, they might have come to the conclusion that the Flooded should not be fucked with.
It's just too dangerous. Because that's almost one of the conclusions that they come to in this novel is, you know, the commander and the AI are constantly asking Lopez, what's your honest assessment of the situation if the Flood get out? And Lopez is pretty much just we're fucked.
We have no defense against this.
If it gets on one world, it's the end of it. And that's probably the best conclusion that they could make from this whole experiment, this horrible experiment.
Yeah.
So there we go, guys. A ringing endorsement of the Mona Lisa. Check it out if you haven't already. But if you've gotten this far into this book club, you've definitely probably read it or watched this book.
And you probably have heard it, or you've probably read it but not heard it. So I definitely encourage you to check out the audiobook. I think I like this one, the Primordial audiobook. I'm sure there's another one I can think of, but definitely top 3 Halo audiobooks in my opinion.
It's good shit.
It is some good shit. So with that, I will say thank you for joining us. You can find every episode of all our shows on our website, halopodcastevolved.com. It also features links to our Discord server, Facebook groups, Patreon page, Xbox Live Club, and any other contact information you might need. Speaking of, we also have a voicemail feature, so if you would like to give us a little voicemail, please leave us your name and you can call us at 205-VOLVED. That's 205-386-5833. It's an American number. I don't know what to do with it. Hopefully you out there will probably know what to do with it. There you go. And with that, I've been your host, David, and until next time, evolve!
Evolve!